New York, 3:43 p.m., Friday in July. The cloudless blue sky of a summer Friday in New York reflected a tranquility found only in the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. Tribeca, a name synonymous with luxury, prestige and moments suspended in gold. In the heart of this neighborhood, an exceptional restaurant stood out from all the others. The Golden Lace. It wasn't just a place to eat. It was a temple of the elite, a place where world-changing decisions were made between glasses of champagne. The decor was a tribute to perfection. The walls covered in delicate artistic frescoes, the white marble tables, the sparkling chandeliers that cast a soft but imposing light. The hushed murmur of conversations mingled with the elegance of gestures, each playing their role in this silent dance of privilege. At the center of this scene, Gregory Lambert was the main actor. At 52, he wasn't just a billionaire. He was an institution. A pharmaceutical industry tycoon, recognized not only for his wealth but also for his reputation as a relentless visionary. Dressed in a tailor-made Italian wool suit, the cut perfect and the collar impeccably fitted, he wore his power like a second skin. His graying hair was neatly combed back, but his eyes, cold as steel, betrayed the man he truly was, calculating, ambitious, and willing to do anything to win. He was surrounded by financial advisors, lawyers and business partners, each taking care not to disturb the fragile balance of this image of success. The smiles were polite, but measured, like gestures in a ballet where you knew where to place your bow without ever exposing yourself too much. Every word Gregory said seemed like a sentence, and the others were there to acquiesce, to feed off his decisions and grow in his shadow. That day, Gregory celebrated the signing of a monumental contract. A partnership with international companies for the production of substances supposed to improve cognitive functions. A project that he presented as a revolutionary advance. But for him, this signing was not just another success in an already busy career. It was an open door to even greater control. An opportunity to expand his empire while feeding his inordinate ego. But a few meters away, in the shadow of this carefully constructed world, Elliot watched, and his eyes were filled with anger, pain, and bitter memories. Elliot was not a simple spectator of this scene. He was part of the story, although Gregory didn't even remember it. Barely 20 years old, he had a youthful face, marked by the trials of the street. His eyes, however, carried an intensity that few could understand. They didn't just watch, they were scrutinizing, searched, dissected reality like a puzzle that had to be solved. He wore an old, torn canvas jacket, baggy pants, and worn sneakers that had seen better. For weeks, he had been wandering New York, searching for sustenance, meaning, and a little dignity. But that dignity had been shattered long before that. Crushed by the workings of a system he had been unable to understand before becoming its victim. Today, he was no longer just a homeless youth. He was a man broken by the reality of a world that did not see him, but he had not lost his will to make himself heard. That day, something in him had changed. The name Gregory Lambert was no longer a simple symbol of power, but a name etched in his memories as a constant reminder of the betrayals he had suffered. He looked helplessly at the plate that had just been placed in front of Gregory. He knew what was in it, what the people at that table didn't know. This wasn't just a delicate dish. It was their key of everything he had lost. Suddenly, without warning, a cry escaped his lips.
¿Dónde atedis?
The words detonated in the air like a stray bullet, shattering the quiet atmosphere of the restaurant. For a moment, everything stopped. The conversations died down in muted murmurs, eyes turned towards the entrance, where Elliot, arms outstretched, observed with feverish intensity. His face was red, disfigured with frustration and fear. The shocked staff reacted instantly, but the scene seemed out of control. The waiters rushed towards Elliot, but a gesture from Gregory stopped them. The latter, surprised but impassive, raised a hand to invite them to keep their distance. Gregory, against all expectations, did not seem upset by the appearance of the young man. On the contrary, he stared at Elliot with a strange tranquility, as if waiting to understand what was going to happen next. "For what?" Gregory asked in a calm voice, cold as marble. Elliot, panting, had difficulty controlling his breathing, but he forced his voice to remain clear, aware that everything rested on this moment. Because I made it myself, and I know what's in it. It was like an electric shock in the room. The murmurs intensified, eyes passed from Gregory to Elliot, each wondering if they were losing themselves in a collective hallucination. The leader, completely out of his comfort zone, slipped away in an attempt to remain discreet, but the damage was done. Elliot was brought inside, but he did not allow himself to be taken without resistance. Gregory watched him, intrigued. Why did this stranger seem to know things he should never have known? Why did this seemingly insignificant young man seem to have such knowledge of his world? When they were finally in a room out of sight, Elliot exploded. I worked in your laboratory.
I was an intern in biochemistry.
I had everything to succeed, but all that was destroyed by your thirst for profit. I discovered prohibited tests. You authorize the use of a food compound which modifies the cognitive functions of individuals without any serious study on its long-term effects. I tried to alert you to pass on the information, but you threw me out, you crushed me.
I not only lost my job, I lost my life, my future. You erased me.
Elliot's words hit Gregory like pouring rain. For a moment he felt lost, but he quickly regained his composure.
And now what?
The silence settled in, heavy and oppressive. Elliot continued, his voice trembling but full of challenge. What you're about to eat is this enhancement that you unscrupulously endorsed. A product that will destroy lives, all for a few dollars more.
You did it for power. You did it for yourself.
You're about to take a bite like it's nothing. Gregory didn't answer right away, but something changed in his eyes. A glint he didn't recognize.
Maybe Ariel Saschen.
Or perhaps the fear that the past he had carefully hidden was catching up with him. The chef, visibly pale as a sheet, wavers under the pressure. A bead of sweat breaks out on his forehead as he tries to regain control of the situation. He adjusts his tie, as if this gesture could save him from a truth that eludes him. This boy is lying. He's crazy. He's just jealous. He never worked for us. His words escape in a rush, but he can't hide the tremor in his voice. The leader's gaze turns away furtively, as if he had the intuition that what he said risked being fatal to him. The other guests at the table seem uncomfortable, their eyes fixed on Gregory, hoping that he will take control of this situation which is quickly getting out of hand. But Gregory, on the other hand, remains perfectly calm, a disturbing calm, as if he was waiting for precisely this moment. He gets up slowly without haste, but each movement seems loaded with weight. He walks towards Elliot, observes him for a long time. Gregory's gaze is cold, penetrating, almost clinical. But something in the young man's posture, in the intensity of his gaze, makes the tycoon waver. Gregory frowns, his mind slipping into a sort of mechanical calculation. What was the name of the project? He asks in an almost anonymous voice, as if the question only completes a riddle he has already solved. Elliot, his throat tight, feels a surge of rage and pain, but he breathes deeply, forcing himself to remain in control of himself. This moment was too important to panic. ARCS 23, he replies, his voice strong but tinged with frustration. You hid the side effects by changing the exposure thresholds in the final report. You thought no one would notice. There is a moment of heavy silence, where the air seems to become thicker, more charged. Gregory doesn't react immediately, but his gaze becomes more intense, sharper. He scrutinizes the young man, examines him, trying to understand if this statement was the truth. But it is the silence that answers his question. The leader, now completely panicked, tries to compose himself, but the air in the room has changed. One of the lawyers of Gregory, a portly man with an impassive expression, suddenly tenses up. He visibly turned pale. A chill runs through the room, as if the reality of what had just been revealed was finally reaching everyone. This lawyer, both a witness and an accomplice to the situation, was confronted with the truth that he had, deep down, always feared. He had signed this report. He too had been in that meeting room once when it was decided that the truth could be left aside for much greater benefits.
Gregory slowly turns back to the table, still calm.
An imperceptible grin forms on his lips, but it is not that of the confident man he was a few minutes earlier. He pushes his plate aside, as if just touching it now might taint him. The smell of food dissipates, carried away by the weight of the conversation, replaced by a palpable tension. At this moment, he knows that the situation has changed. Elliot, this young man he had ignored, had planted a seed of doubt that would slowly grow, despite attempts to suppress it. The New York Times publishes a front-page article that shakes the industry. An anonymous whistleblower, former intern, reveals the existence of an experimental food additive that Gregory Lambert and his company had secretly introduced it into their products. The report states that the side effects of the product were deliberately changed in the final version. The newspaper even publishes an extract from the internal report, accompanied by a quote from Elliot, and everything becomes very real. The media are getting excited, news shows are multiplying interviews, and social networks are on fire. Citizens suddenly feel responsible, as if the truth, long hidden, had come to light. Gregory Lambert, at first, categorically denies the accusations. He attempts damage control with the same ease he uses to manipulate information in his own businesses. He says it's an attempt to discredit his name, an attack orchestrated by people jealous of his success. But even the most forgiving journalists are starting to ask questions. Gregory doesn't seem as in control of the situation as he once was. The trigger comes a few days later. Elliot, in an act of defiance and meticulous preparation, makes a revelation which definitively destabilizes Gregory. The young man, despite everything, had planned for the worst. Before disappearing, he had taken care to save incriminating evidence. On a USB stick hidden in the heel of his worn shoe, Elliot kept a copy of the original report. The report with Gregory's annotations. He had not only documented the irregularities, he had held the key to the scandal. The annotations in Gregory's handwriting, proving that the changes had been made knowingly, constituted irrefutable proof that none of this was an accident. When the official investigation is launched, the truth begins to emerge with unstoppable force. Legal experts and journalists find fertile ground to dig into testimony and documents. Elliot's report, with its annotations and irrefutable documentation, quickly made the rounds of institutions. Independent experts confirm that the modified ingredient has serious long-term neurological effects, thus confirming the accusations. At this point, the Gregory's reputation undergoes a slow and inexorable fall. He is summoned before the Congress, and his answers are put under a microscope. The public, who had admired him for years as a visionary and brilliant businessman, now saw him in a completely new light. His image is disintegrating, a victim of his own greed and disdain for ethics. The world he had built on a foundation of influence and manipulation is crumbling on top of him. The media, once lenient towards his maneuvers, no longer have any pity. Gregory Lambert is nothing more than a symbol of a corrupted system. Elliot, for his part, walks away, but he knows that one way or another he has won. He is no longer invisible. He took control of his own story. The story of a young man whose life had been crushed by powerful people, but who, through his resilience and his desire for truth, managed to reverse the balance. 3 months later, the world has changed for Elliot. This young man, who was none other than a homeless person a few months earlier, is today a public figure, a whistleblower whose history is now a reference. Universities solicit him. Conferences on scientific ethics invite him to speak. He was asked to become a spokesperson for workers' rights, to raise awareness about abuse of power in the pharmaceutical sector. But it's not the media hype or the applause that matters to him. This is the dignity that he found again, the one that had been taken away from him for years.
Sleeps in a real bed.
For the first time in years, he can allow himself to savor the simplicity of an ordinary room, of daily comforts that had become a distant dream. This stability is a luxurious privilege, a normality that he cherishes, but does not forget where it comes from. His face, once marked by fatigue and resignation, is today calmer, more serene. He finally has the opportunity to rebuild your life. But it is not only public recognition that gratifies him. What he gained was identity found, and more, a voice. During a television interview, the host, a man in a hurry and smiling, asks him the question he probably anticipated. Now that everything is behind you, do you blame Gregory Lambert? There is a pause. A heavy silence, that of introspection. Elliot immerses himself in his thoughts. His gaze wanders into space for a few seconds. Then he looks up at the camera. His tone is calm, composed, but determined. There is no bitterness in his voice, just the serenity of a man who has found an answer after searching for a long time. I didn't want revenge. I wanted him to listen, to hear a voice that he had erased. That day, I screamed because I knew it was time for someone to tell the truth, even if no one wanted to hear it from a homeless person.
The words ring in the air like a bell of truth.
The host remained silent for a moment, touched by the depth of the response. Elliot did not seek revenge. He sought reconnaissance of his existence, of his sufferings, and above all, of the truth that he carried within him. It was not revenge, it was a cry for justice. Gregory Lambert, for his part, experienced a dizzying fall. Sentenced to a heavy fine, excluded from his business, he saw his empire collapse in a few weeks. Once hailed as a visionary in the business world, he is now a pariah. His name, which was once authoritative, is now synonymous with corruption, abuse of power and injustice. He hides from the spotlight, avoiding interviews and awkward questions. Invitations to conferences are rare. Those who had idolized and celebrated him are now turning their backs on the man they once considered a role model. The shame of his face-to-face with Elliot becomes a moral lesson taught in law schools, journalism and ethics faculties. The students use it as an example of how the powerful can abuse their status, but also of how honesty and the resilience of a single individual can reveal gigantic injustices. Their revelation of the ARC's 23 scandal becomes a textbook case. How a former intern, an unknown person, a homeless person, defied a multinational, and brought down one of the most powerful men in the industry. Gregory Lambert was a pawn in a game he thought he had mastered, but it crushed him with a force he never anticipated. Elliot, for his part, did not seek to glorify himself. His journey has become a source of inspiration for thousands of people, but he remains humble. He has not forgotten where he came from. He concludes his first book with these words, written with a clarity he had never had in his past. We must never underestimate the voice of the one the world refuses to listen to. Sometimes it is he who has the truth. His words resonate as a universal, transcendent truth. A man, isolated and rejected, changed the course of things simply by refusing to remain silent. Elliot learned that the truth lies not only in public recognition, but in the courage to say what needs to be said, even when the world seems closed to this truth. The echoes of its history continue to spread. The people who listen to it are not content to follow a simple revenge story. They see in him a symbol of the fight against injustice, an illustration of what a determined individual to make your voice heard, even when it seems insignificant. And perhaps, through his journey, they all learned an important lesson, that truth always has strength, even when it seems to be crushed under the weight of lies.